before I get into the midweek and also the weekend games for MLS Matchweek number 15, because this week is a little bit odd, where there's actually going to be 6 games this week, including the midweek and also the weekend games. There's going to be one on Wednesday, one on Thursday, one on Friday, and there's going to be 3 on Saturday before we wrapped up for the Gold Cup break, and we won't have MLS action until June 22nd. But before we get to that, I actually want to kind of just congratulate the U.S. Youth National Team and the U.S. Under 20 National Team by beating France this morning in the round of 16 to move on to the quarterfinal for the 3rd straight year. Unfortunately, I haven't been really kind of keeping touch with the under 20 World Cup, and I probably should be, because that team that the US are playing is pretty much guys that we could potentially use in our future for the US men's national team. But I haven't really been paying a lot of attention to, because the most of their games are during the daytime, or like today where their game takes place at 8:30, and that I didn't want to wake up so early in the morning just to just watch them play. And I want to I have to go to work at 12 o'clock. I want to just wake up at 11 before I come back here at around 9 o'clock. So obviously I need my sleep in terms of that. But I certainly saw the highlights, and I've been kind of seeing the highlights for most of their game. And I'll tell you what, there was a lot of panic about the U.S. Youth National Team, talking about how after that loss against Ukraine, and that there was a lot of criticism that Tab Ramos has got. I think that he might have silenced his critics after this game against France, because like the France men's national team, like their senior team, this French youth national team is not a joke. This is actually one of the team that could definitely win the World Cup. In fact, I heard that they were favorites coming into the U20 World Cup. So certainly, not only we were able to be one of the big guns, but now we'll move on into the quarterfinal, and we did it in comfort behind fashion. Like the fact that we went down 2-1 and able to turn around and win it 3-2, that does not happen a lot of time with the national team. So certainly congratulations to them. They're moving on into the quarterfinal, and let's hope this is finally the year that they can move on into the semifinal. Like the youth national team, for the last 3 years they've been into the quarterfinal, but they all got knocked out around this stage. They're kind of like the senior team, where whenever they get to the round of 16, that is as far as they get. And I think if Tab Ramos does get this team into the semifinal, he's always going to have his critics and all the people complaining that Tab Ramos, he's been doing an okay job, but he's not doing an exceptional job, and a job that could accelerate this U.S. team and could potentially be a very decent team in the future. But that being said, let's actually now get into today's games. And we're going to be talking about the first game. There's actually going to be, like I said, there's going to be 6 games for the midweek and also for the weekend game. And the first game take place on Wednesday is Montreal. So they take on Seattle. Montreal, their record is 7-3-7, while Seattle is 7-5-3. So both teams had identical wins. Montreal, of course, lost 3-0 to Orlando City at home, while Seattle lost 2-1 to FC Dallas away. And I also want to mention that both of these teams have kind of struggled. And for Montreal, it's more like they have really struggled in these last 5 games. In these last 5 games, they lost 3-0 to Orlando City in the last match away. They did win 2-1 against RSL, but that was their only win during this 5-game stretch, as they lost 4-2 to LAFC on the road, drew 0-0 to the New England Revolution at home, and lost 2-1 to FC Cincinnati. I understand that match was the match where they had the FC Cincinnati has the new coach, and usually when you are facing against a team with a new coach, there's a lot of uncertainty. But knowing how bad FC Cincinnati has been, and FC Cincinnati has been kind of like the punching bag of the league, it started to kind of feel like it's a little bit embarrassing, the fact that they did lose to FC Cincinnati in this game. It was basically almost a free 3 points that they could have got, and they got none out of that free points. But for Seattle, they lost 2-1 to FC Dallas. They lost 3-2 to SKC. They drew 2-2 against Philly, won 2-1 against Orlando City, and won 1-0 against Houston. But, ever since this Philly game, they have kind of slid downhill, and part of that has to do with the fact that they have to deal with injuries and also guys that is either going to the Gold Cup, the Euro qualifier, or they would be going to Copa America. And in many ways, I think both of these teams really needed the Gold Cup break. Like, for Seattle, obviously with a 3-day rest and have to travel not necessarily all the way across the country, but they still had to travel a long way to Montreal. This is definitely not going to be an easy task. And knowing the fact that I think I'm pretty sure most of the guys that they have for that is going to the Euros qualifier, they probably are already gone. So guys like Gustav Svensson, I think he won't be available in this game because he's already with Sweden. And I might be wrong by this, but I think the Gold Cup player like Jordan Morris and Christian Rodon, they probably are no longer with this team yet and have already joined the national team for the Gold Cup. I might be wrong though, so don't quote me and say that is actually true. And if that is wrong, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, this is a game that I think both teams really want to just kind of get over with it and just hopefully maybe just get a point or two. I mean, I think for Seattle, if they can get a point out of this, then I think they'll be happy with the result. But as for Montreal, yeah, I mean, it really has started to take a toll in terms of this team ever since they lost like their biggest star in Nacho Piatti for now 2 months. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this one will go. But moving on into the next game is the draw king of MLS, NYCFC. They take on FC Cincinnati. The reason why I call NYCFC the draw king of MLS because they always tends to draw games. They have 8 draws so far. They have their record is 4-8-1, while FC Cincinnati is an abysmal 3-2-10 record. And just as they are the draw king of MLS, they drew the last game against Columbus away where they drew 2-2 to them, while FC Cincinnati 1 win in 11 games. In the last 5 games for NYCFC, Columbus, they drew 2-2 to NYCFC, drew 1-1 to Chicago, or NYCFC drew 2-2 to Columbus, and NYCFC drew 1-1 to Chicago. They did win 2-0 on the road against the Galaxy, did win 2-0 against Montreal, but drew 1-1 against Orlando City at home. For FC Cincinnati, they lost 3-1 to Colorado, lost 2-0 to the Redbulls, lost 5-1 against FC Cincinnati, or 5-1 to Orlando City, which is the worst loss that they have suffered in MLS so far. They did win 2-1 against Montreal, but they also lost 1-0 to the San Jose Earthquakes. And to me, for NYCFC, you would think that this should be 3 points for them. I mean, I know they did play on the road this week, but it was in Columbus, so it's not really a long flight back home to play it on a short week. Whereas if you're FC Cincinnati, that is a different story. FC Cincinnati, they had to go on the road against Colorado, which means that they now have to travel all the way across the other side of the country on a short rest. And knowing the fact that this team is just in such a mess right now, for NYCFC, I'm pretty sure a draw is not good enough in this game. I know they've been the draw king of MLS, and they make sure that they get all those draws, and which is why they also, I think they have currently the longest unbeaten streak right now with 9 games. They have not lost a single game since the latter part of March, but at the same time, they haven't won a lot of these games, and they have been drawing a lot of these games. So, it's good that you of course are able to not lose a lot of games, but when you're drawing a lot of games and not winning a lot of games, that doesn't really that might be a recipe in terms of maybe making the playoffs, but for NYCFC, for a team that wants to be competing in the Eastern Conference and want to competing with the likes of Atlanta and the Redbulls, it's clearly not good enough with the way that they keep drawing all these kind of games. But moving on into the next match is TFC. They take on Sporting KC, and this is a game just like the Montreal versus Seattle game between two struggling teams right now. TFC, they have really fall off a cliff after that great start to the season. Their record is now 5-3-6. While Sporting KC, they're still battling with injuries, and well, they're kind of still trying to get everybody 100% healthy, and also they're trying to create a bit of a resurgence to get back above the red line in the Western Conference. But their record is 3-6-5. TFC, like I said, they fall off a cliff ever since they got off to a good start and now are winless in 6 games. While SKC did drew 1-1 against Houston, which was a good point because Houston away is an incredibly tough matchup or incredibly tough to try to get a point away out of that, and Sporting KC of course just did that. And in the last 5 games for TFC, well, they drew 1-1 to Vancouver, lost 2-1 against the Quakes at home, lost 3-0 against RSL, drew 0-0 against DC United, and lost 2-1 to Philly at home. Well, for Sporting KC, they drew 1-1 to Houston, lost 2-0 to the Galaxy, won 3-2 against Seattle, but then drew 1-1 against Vancouver and lost 1-0 against SKC. So, I think TFC, this game kind of means a lot more than what SKC is, because I know for SKC, once they get everybody healthy and once those guys that just came back from injuries aren't 100% healthy, they should definitely be above the red line, and they should have a kind of a resurgence in the second half to make the playoffs. Whereas for TFC, that's what I am a little bit concerned about this team. Now, the good news is, and this is kind of a little bit spoiler to tomorrow's video, is that they finally sign a player to help them short out the defense, and it is going to be Omar Gonzalez that they have just signed a couple of days ago, and hopefully he of course can help out the defensive end of this team, because this team's defense has been garbage in the last couple of games. But for TFC, they have to start winning some of their home games. Like, when you look on the sheet, they lost at home to the Quakes, they drew 0-0 to DC, and they lost 2-1 against Philly. And that hasn't even got back to the fact that they also dropped a lot of home games before the last 5 game stretch. So, yeah, they're dropping too many home points in this stretch where they have really struggled, and they really need to pick it up if they want to potentially make the playoffs. I mean, in fact, they're literally just sitting above the red line right now. They're actually in a freeway tie right now with 7th place. The 8th place team and the 9th place team, which I believe is Chicago and Orlando City, are all tied at 18 points. So a slip up here, and if one of those 2 teams that I mentioned won, then they would be dropping below the red line. And TFC fan is going to start panicking if this team is dropping below the red line after such a big and impressive start that they have. But moving on into the next game is the Quakes. So the Quakes, they play against FC Dallas, and the Quakes, of course, they drew 1-1 against DC United away, which means that they actually finished that East Coast road trip, that 2-game mini East Coast road trip, with 4 points, which is something that I don't think I have had said about the Quakes in a very long time. Like, usually whenever they go on an Eastern Conference mini trip, like a 2-game or a 3-game road trip in the East Coast, they usually return home with 0 points because they just don't not win or get a result on the road. But yet they got back-to-back result on the road, and that now they are, they're literally right there in terms of going above the red line. If they can actually beat FC Dallas in this game, which FC Dallas, they're actually currently in 6th place, and I think they're only a point ahead of the Quakes. If the Quakes can beat FC Dallas, then then the Quakes for sure would be above the red line heading into the Gold Cup break. And I think if anyone would have said that the Quakes, after that 0-4 start, and that they could be above the red line after or before the Gold Cup break, yeah, I don't think anybody would have believed that. But this team has just been red hot lately, and they're playing against an FC Dallas team that have won 2-1 against Seattle at home. But no doubt that game, I would say that they were kind of pretty fortunate in that game. I mean, they didn't actually score a goal in that game, and that they can thank Seattle for scoring 2 of their goal and scoring 2 own goals in this game. That was the reason why they won this game. But in terms of the last 5 games for the Quakes, they of course drew 1-1 to DC United. They won 2-1 on the road against TFC, then won 4-1 against Chicago. That was the Wando historic game. They did lose to New England 3-1 on the road, but they won 1-0 against FC Cincinnati, and they have picked up points in I believe 7 of their last 8 matches so far. For Dallas, they won 2-1 against Seattle, which ended their 6-game winless streak. They lost 2-1 to Vancouver, drew 1-1 to LAFC, but then lose 2-0 to LAFC, this time on the road, while they lost 3-1 against the Redbulls. And, Dallas, as I mentioned throughout the season, they have been a team that has done fairly well at home, but in terms of on the road, that is a different story. They have been pretty bad on the road. Like, besides that, the only one exception that they've been good on the road was against Atlanta, where they were able to win 2-1 in that game. But that was really the only exception, and I think that might also be the only road win that they have so far this season. And knowing the fact that they are gonna still miss a lot of players that is still with the U.S. Youth National Team. Obviously, as I mentioned, with the U.S. Youth National Team now heading into the quarterfinal, this will definitely cement and make sure that Youth National Team will, the players that, of course, that is part of their Youth National Team will definitely not be available in this game. Now, if the U.S. would have lost this one, maybe I think some of those Youth National Team players would have been back. Like some of those players, like Paxi Palmico, for example, would have been back with this team. And I guess that is also another reason why I probably should have cheered on the U.S. very hard in this game, because not only the fact that I want them to move on into the quarterfinal of the U20 World Cup, but knowing that if they move on, then Dallas will not have those players, and that we will be just playing a Dallas team that, when you saw how they're missing so many starters, they have really, really struggled. So, thank you, U.S. Youth National Team, for moving on into the next round, knowing that Dallas, although Dallas, they'll probably, they'll be happy. I'm pretty sure they'll be happy that some of their player and some of the player that is involved with the Youth National Team is moving on into the next round, but they probably are not happy the fact that they will definitely not have them again for one more game in this game against the Quakes before the Gold Cup break. So, yeah, for the Quakes, I think this is definitely a big chance for them to get all 3 points. And I haven't even got to the fact that the Quakes have been very good against Dallas. I think in the last 4 meetings, we have not lost to Dallas, or even the last 5 meeting too, that we have not lost to Dallas. So, this should definitely favor the Quakes in this game, but you never know, because it is the Quakes, and even though this good run that they've been on, you never know. They might pull some crazy things that eventually will just end this good run that they have, and just kind of end this run before the Gold Cup break on a bit of a sour note. So, we'll see how this game will go. But moving on into the next match is the Union. They take on the Redbulls, and this is probably the game of the week, because the Redbulls, they're sitting at the top of the Eastern Conference with a record of 8-4-4, while the Redbulls, their record is 7-3-5 and currently 4th in the Eastern Conference. But there is no doubt that the Redbulls are charging along, and like Atlanta, they are just charging up the table after a poor start. Philly, of course, won 3-2 away against Minnesota, become the first team to ever beat Minnesota and the first team to walk out with all 3 points at Allianz Field. While the Redbulls, they're unbeaten in 5 games, and in the last 5 games, as I mentioned, Philly won 3-2 against Minnesota, drew 1-1 against Colorado, lost 3-1 against actually, this is actually wrong. They actually didn't lose 3-1 to Colorado. Let me just actually quickly look at here. Yeah, I made a bit of a mistake in terms of that, but let me just quickly look at here. So, yeah, they actually lost 3-1 to Portland. I don't know why I wrote Colorado there. They drew 0-0 to Seattle, and they won 2-1 against TFC on the road. While for the Redbulls, they won 4-0 against RSL, won 2-0 on the road against FC Cincinnati, won 1-0 in that emotional victory against Atlanta, drew 2-2 against Vancouver, and actually this actually comes before the Atlanta game, and they, of course, won 3-1 against Dallas. And, the Redbulls, they have won 4 out of their last 5 games, and no doubt are in Fuego mode right now. And, this is definitely a big test for the Union. And one thing that will definitely not be in favor of the Union is that I believe they are winless at home in 3 games. And it's, when you're winless at home in 3 games and when you're dropping points and not getting victory at home, that is definitely not a good recipe of potentially sustaining your spot at the top of the Eastern Conference. And yeah, this is definitely a big test for the Union. And as I mentioned, the Union this year, there's been time that they have looked very decent. And then there's times where they revert back to last year form where they just cannot finish their chances. And if the Union can be like the Union in the last game against Minnesota, where they able to take away most of their chances against this Redbulls team, then yeah, obviously the Union has a big chance of winning this. But knowing this, the Redbulls, they'll try to make sure they'll limit the chances that the Union would get. So the Union, they better make sure they put away those chances, because if you do not put away those chances against a very good team, then yeah, most likely you're not going to get as many chances as you would get if you play against like a weak team, like let's say Colorado, for example. And speaking of Colorado, the last game that I'm going to be previewing is the Rapids, or shall I say the Red Hot Rapids, as they are take on Minnesota in this game. So the Rapids are 3-3-9. It's an ugly record, but let me explain why they are red hot. They're playing against Minnesota, who is 6-3-6, and the reason why Colorado has been red hot is that they are unbeaten in 4 games after starting it with an 0 and 11. Well, they actually went the first 11 game without a win, and now they have got wins in 3 of their last 4 matches. Well, Minnesota, as I mentioned just a couple of seconds ago, they lost 3-2 against Philly in that gut-wrenching loss, and that they lose for the first time at Allianz Field. Well, in the last 5 games for Colorado, they of course won 3-1 against FC Cincinnati, drew 1-1 to Philly, won 3-2 against Columbus, lost 1-0 or won 1-0 against the Galaxy, which is the game that ended their historic bad start to the season, and then of course lost to their Rocky Mountain rival RSL in this game, as they lost 2-3 on the road. While for Minnesota, they lost 3-2 against again, I messed it. I keep putting Colorado on the last 5 games for some reason, but it's actually Philly that they lost in that one. They lost 3-0 against Atlanta. They won 1-0 against Houston, then won 1-0 again against Columbus, but lost 2-0 against Minnesota. So, for the Rapids, they have definitely been in red hot form lately, and here's another chance where they're playing against a team that is relatively not doing very well, and that especially the fact that they're playing at home, this could be a chance for them to get all 3 points again. Although, for Minnesota, so far the struggle that they have not only been the fact that they just cannot put away their chances. I mean, in the last game, they had so many shots on goal and so many shots in that game, and there was a couple that was on target, but they still cannot walk out with all 3 points. But it's also the fact that Minnesota is starting to revert to last year form, where they cannot win on the road. And yeah, this is where the Rapids can definitely take advantage. And who would have thought that the Rapids would be heading into the Gold Cup potentially with an unbeaten run of 5 games? Like, I don't think a lot of people, like MLS, there's a reason why this is a weird league, because there can be some crazy things that happen. Like, as I mentioned, nobody would have thought that the Quakes would be in such a good run after they got off to an absolute horrid start to the season. And it's the same thing with the Rapids. Nobody thought that they would be heading into the Gold Cup break on a 5-game unbeaten run after going 11 games without a win to start the season, which is the worst start that any MLS team has suffered. But that being said, that is pretty much it in terms of the preview. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all these games? Make sure you guys leave your prediction below, and which one are you going to most likely keep an eye on? I'm pretty sure this one is probably the answer, because 2 teams that definitely could be could be a bit of a preview in terms of what we're going to see in the playoffs, because I think both of these teams are definitely going to be in the playoffs, and both of these teams are definitely looking to try to make a deep run. So this is definitely a good early kind of regular season test to see how both of these teams would be. But that being said, let me know in the comments below of if any of these games interest you heading into this match week, and make sure try to watch as much MLS action as possible if you're a person that like MLS, because we won't have MLS until June 22nd, and that all we're going to have is basically just Gold Cup action. And unless you like to watch the U.S. men's national team play, or you like to watch the Gold Cup, then yeah, then you can of course do your thing. But that being said, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and make sure you leave your prediction below in the comments section. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.